Do you regret, though, that, I mean, we now have a generation of younger politicians who have mineral water for lunch and they're all tucked up in bed at 10:30, that we've lost something, that people can't do what you did and still do their jobs perfectly adequately?
Well, I think some people can, but it has changed. It's a new puritan age. And I was a barrister before I became a politician, but we used to go to the pub for lunch when I was doing trials at the bar. Well, the members of the bar are the same now. They don't do that. They sit in the robing room and have a glass of orange juice, I'm assured. And not that we didn't get smashed or anything, but we were reasonably gregarious. And occasionally, I'm already beginning to pause early in your interviews, so should I really go down this track, which I tend only to do. I do sometimes think it is a rather chained age. I'm sure it's for the better. They're all frightfully obsessed with their own quality of life and everybody else's, and they all campaign against cheap drink in supermarkets, and they're very frankly don't do the kind of things we did. And am I from a past age where suddenly I don't understand the desire for the state to intrude in all these areas of life, or the need to listen to the solemn advice of civil servants on how many vegetables to eat and when a day, and all this kind of thing. And I just feel my probably slightly more robust approach to life sort of fills out by politics. And I do think I was practically the only one of my colleagues who did not suffer from stress. I mean, the last 18 years in government is practically unknown. And lots of colleagues exhausted and all the rest of it. And I think the fact that I'm so laid back, I'm almost horizontal. And if I get fed up, I clear off. It's not just to go bird watching. My secretary is quite used to losing me to the Oval, to playing truant, watching cricket, or sometimes to clear off to the British Museum. And the weekends, I just suddenly go bird watching or whatever, watch football. They kept me sane. And I think that is necessary. And so the really earnest, up at 7 in the morning, when you're not doing the Today programme, and an orange juice for lunch. Yeah. Crazy way of.
I think you. The defining controversy of your political time at Cambridge was inviting the fascist leader Oswald Mosley to speak. Do you regret that now?
No, he'd been there several times, actually. I wasn't the first person to invite him. I probably heard him twice, 3 times. Oswald Mosley is one of the finest speakers I've ever heard. It's one of the dangerous things about him. But actually we laid on a debate. We actually challenged him, a bit like you sitting there, of his life and times, but more politically. And 2 of us took him on. The other was John Gummer. And we sat down and debated with Oswald Mosley. I think we held our own. He wasn't too good. He was pretty thin at times, defending his record in the 30s. I had seen him. They are never persuasively, in a way I'd never flirted with fascism. But I had seen him laid on what was undoubtedly a brilliant performance in the Union on a previous occasion, mainly because some left-wing opponents had strode forward and hit him in the face with a custard pie, which brought a shocked silence to the whole hall. And I've never seen a speaker make more brilliant use of this pause in the speech, because before that he'd been having a hard time in the Cambridge Union barracks, like the House of Commons sometimes. And the shocked silence, he took this period and he used it when he was still at his best, really. And you saw how this guy had been such a danger in the 1930s, because he was a class act as a persuasive mass orator.
President Blair of Europe. What do you think about that idea?
My main reaction is, I don't think you'll get it. I think the smaller countries will not want somebody from one of the bigger countries. I think not only the smaller countries, quite rightly, people would not want somebody who's wanting to cut a dashing figure on the world stage. And I think we'd be better to start with some more routine guy, if it starts. Again, let me.
So you say no to President
If
Blair?
It starts. Yes, I mean, not because I'm vehemently opposed to Tony, but I think because I don't obviously disagree politically with Tony, but we could get some worse sort of body from some other country. Who's the alternative, I'd want to know, first of all. But I think, personally, Blair loves the drama, loves the spotlight. He will imagine that he's treading the grand stage and all the rest of it. Now, it's not just me. I think most people just don't want that. And I think the small countries will fear somebody of this kind.
If you look back at Mrs. Thatcher's period in government, you struggled even to just stop the growth in public spending. I mean, public spending reductions that are being proposed at the moment by the Conservative Party are more severe than anything you managed to do in that period. Do you think they're really doable?
Well, they're starting from inflated levels, is my opinion. You're quite right. I don't think people have taken on the enormity of the task we face. You're quite right. Margaret Thatcher's government never really cut departmental spending.
Not in real terms.
No,
You're planning real-term cuts.
Where we did, I mean, we obviously got out of debt. We devoted a lot to getting out of debt and so on, and succeeded in getting out of debt, which was then, as now, absolutely essential to running a successful mixed, private sector economy that was going to earn our living and be competitive again. But we were helped by the privatisation programme. The public accounts which Wilson Callaghan had shot to blazes contain quite colossal subsidies to rust bucket companies and failed industries which the taxpayer was pouring his and her money into rather than spending it on health or education or anything of that kind. So privatised steel or privatised shipbuilding. I mean, I went out to transport. Norma Fowler and I privatised the only loss-making hotel chain in the United Kingdom. We owned all the railway hotels. We privatised British road services, Pickfords. We owned lorries, all kinds of things. Everyone lost money. Everyone was being subsidised by the taxpayer, and therefore public spending and debt was got under control. Health service, we put a lot of money into that.
But what will be there to sell off if you return to power?
Oh, well, you can't now. They'll put asset sales in. Gordon always talks about asset sales. I always talked about asset sales when all else defeated me in getting the bullets to balance for the next couple of years. On the basis it's been 12 months' time, we'll think of something more sensible. There are a lot of assets to sell out there.
Well, highways agency.
But we never get the bureaucracy to sell the blasted things.
What about the highways agency?
Highways agency used to have lots and lots of land. Nowadays it still has.
Well, there's the motorways.
That have been bought for road schemes that had fallen through.
Well,
privatise the highways agency.
Well, what do you think? They're worth about 80 billion, probably.
I'm sure it's been looked at, but I have no idea whether we're contemplating privatising. I looked at it myself, but it's yes, you can.
Yeah, it's not tricky, is it?
But I have no idea whether George is. I'm not. I shadow Biz. I'm not immersed. I spent a lot of time with George, but I have not been immersed in any discussions about whether or not we're going things like privatising the maintenance of the highways agency.
How does abolishing the Human Rights Act improve human rights?
I don't think it does, particularly. I think more people bring daft claims and excite the newspapers than ever win daft actions. You never hear that they've lost and it's been thrown out. It's like the person who sued somebody for being burnt by hot coffee. Even in America, I think she lost. But it gets discredited by stupid claims more than by stupid decisions. And we've said we're going to revisit. I think we said we don't like the way it was brought into British law. And people like Dominic Grieve, ahead of me in the work of it. But we shouldn't exaggerate the effect it's going to have, and we shouldn't get so wild with rage when people we don't like start making stupid arguments on the basis their human rights are being impeded. They may use that argument, but they're talking out the back of their hat. And the European Convention of Human Rights, as applied by a sensible judge, will stop them running this nonsense and will only protect what are the legitimate human rights. Nobody's going to repudiate the convention. I mean, when do we give up the right of free speech?
Yeah, the freedom from torture and all the other things.
Yeah, and actually it's still relevant. I mean, I do think the Blair government was totally illiberal. And nobody in this country is ever going to do evil things to human rights kind of deliberately, but the hysteria that surrounded our first impact with mass terrorism led to a complete suspension of the rule of law. And without naming individual Home Secretaries of the new Labour Party, their regard for the headlines in the tabloid press was very much higher than their regard for the rule of law or individual liberties. And, you do need some backstops to stop this kind of thing going on. If you have a Home Secretary who's just being run by editorials for too long, perfectly decent people start losing their personal liberties. The Conservative Party stands for personal liberty, in my opinion.